Coming up on the show today, Vision Ireland's David Redmond joins me, and we're talking about WeWalk and WeAssist coming to the UK.
This is Double Tap, where blind people talk tech. Here's Stephen Scott and Shaun Preece.
Well, it's one half of the band with you today. Yes, Stephen Scott here. Shaun Preece is taking a well-earned rest after getting the cold, as you will have probably heard most recently. But yes, he is taking some time off to recuperate. I hope you get well soon, my friend. Coming up on the show today, I'm going to be having David Redmond here. He is from Vision Ireland, and he's going to be telling us all about his thoughts on the new Apple Watch Ultra 3, some big news from Sky TV in the UK for those of us who are fans of audio description on demand. Good news at last. And also, although initially he was here to talk about LinkedIn and the distinct lack of accessibility on the Microsoft app, he's now here to praise Microsoft and LinkedIn for the work they've done in improving the app. So full 180 on that one. We'll get into all that with David very, very shortly. But as I said at the top, WeWalk, as I've been talking about quite a lot. I love to go a WeWalk with my WeWalk Smart Gain 2. Well, the good news is that WeAssist, a service which is from WeWalk, is now available in the UK as a beta. But what is WeAssist? How does it work? And how does it compare with other services out there? It's hard not to compare it, I guess, with services like Be My Eyes and Aira. I'd say personally it's a little bit more like Aira because it's a service from WeWalk themselves rather than a volunteer-led service. So it's a bit different in that way. But I want to know more about it. I want to understand it. And we're going to be speaking to Jean-Marc Figali very soon on the show. But I do want to take you back today to June 2024, June last year, when I spoke with Jean-Marc Figali and Joe Alfonso from WeWalk to better understand what WeAssist was and how it did compare to those other services.
I think there's really two elements of this. The first part is we think that those services are great. We think that they have their own sort of place, if you'd like, in the market. But we realized we've got a few WeWalk users. We've got our WeWalk navigation app, and we don't want people to have to jump apps necessarily to get that experience. So we thought, hey, let's try building this ourselves the WeWalk way. The second part is the ability for us to really have a deep level integration with our existing navigation system and hardware with the WeAssist system. So right now, if you were to call one of our agents through WeAssist, our agents get full access to your navigation system and your WeWalk app as you're sort of walking around and getting that experience. So we can sort of guide you, we can see what your journey is, and we can make modifications to that agent experience as well to make sure that they're well informed, to make sure we know what the agents are doing or saying, but just to streamline that whole experience. You're not jumping between a bunch of different apps with sort of surface level connections. For us, it's really all built in. And it also means that we can start to experiment and trial some new technology for those that choose to be part of it. So again, going back to that discussion of computer vision, you don't need a human agent to do everything. Things like text detection, street furniture detection, even crossing detections could be done with computer vision. And so as we start to roll out those features, we can start to run them alongside WeAssist to see if users prefer using AI or if users prefer using an agent. So it gives us a bit more flexibility, if you like. But at the same time, if we have WeWalk users that say, hey, look, I'm an existing, Be My Eye user, or I'm in the US and I use Aira, then there should be absolutely no reason why you shouldn't use those other services alongside with your WeWalk cane. As we sort of like to say, again, everyone has options here. It's just tools in a toolbox. And we thought, let's try building another one of those tools.
So that's Jean-Marc Figali speaking back in June 2024, explaining what WeAssist is and even explaining a little bit about how it compares to other services. But I guess there's still a question around why not use more AI rather than human interaction in this way? I also put that question to Jean-Marc and Joe Alfonso.
How do we use a camera in a way that still is mission critical? Well, we don't think as of today AI is perfect in terms of computer vision. So in the meantime, to give users that extra experience, let's professionally train some WeWalk agents. Let's have users click a button in the WeWalk app to connect to one of our trained agents. And let's have the agent then see through the camera and guide the user, because nothing beats that human assistance.
But it allows you to connect to a professionally sighted trained agent that will provide visual assistance to a visually impaired person. For example, in indoor environments, such as airports where our navigation system is not designed for that. They can use the WeAssist platform in order to be able to use their phone's camera to provide the visual information to the sighted agent. So for example, if you need assistance with getting from one gate to another, or if you're just shopping around and need assistance with reading the food labels, you can go ahead and use the WeAssist platform for that.
So we've built our own training protocols, again, with our experiences of being guided as visually impaired people, where each of our our agents, we already have a few of them, go through this whole sort of process, this 2 to 3 week process of learning different visual functions, learning the right words, whether someone wants cardinal directions or clock-based directions or simple left or right. So that level of depth and detail to make sure that, as a WeAssist user, you can feel confident that the person on the other end of the line it sort of will know how to guide you. And we've got the RNIB helping us out on this. So we're trialing out the system. Whilst we've already got it in a few international airports, we're also running trials here in the UK with the RNIB helpline team as those sighted agents, people who have been helping visually impaired people for years, now using our system above the existing telephony system to get that visual access to what the user is doing.
So there you go. Big questions to be asked, and we're going to be putting those questions about WeAssist to Jean-Marc Fagali as he returns to Double Tap next week. So stay tuned for that. Can't wait to hear that conversation with him. And of course, your questions are always welcome. I am going to be reviewing the WeWalk Smart Cane 2 very soon. Doing it a little bit differently. I'm going to be answering your questions specifically because we've had a lot of questions in about the WeWalk Smart Cane 2 and in particular my experiences of it. So I'm going to be answering your questions here on the show in a special episode coming very, very soon, I promise you. Right, let's move on and welcome our guest to the show today. He's returning champion David Redmond from Vision Ireland, host of the Talking Technology podcast, and he's back here with us now to talk all things tech and more. David Redmond, good to have you back with us here on Double Tap.
Thank you so much for having me, Stephen. How are things?
Good. Things are good. It's always nice to talk. It's nice to talk to an Irish person. R. It gives me the opportunity to do that, and I know how much you love it.
I absolutely do. Love and hate it depending on the day, Stephen. Depending on the day. I'll allow it.
I'm going to just put it to a public vote here. Hang on. What do we think? Do people like this? No. Okay. Fair enough. Right. So, how are things? It's been
very
busy.
Good.
I'm imagining
absolutely.
Over at Vision
Always
Island.
busy. Yeah, always busy. We've been working on some really cool stuff. We've been keeping up with the podcasts as well lately. Podcast newsletter. There's been some really exciting stuff as you've been covering here on Double Tap as well. We've had the Ally Solos. Looking forward to those. Meta glasses, obviously, they've been huge. I think it's really been the year of the smart glasses, hasn't it?
Yeah, do you know what? You're absolutely right. I mean, that is exactly the thing. Every time we talk about any technology these days in any group, and I've been fortunate enough to be invited along to a number of different places recently to talk about technology, the subject always comes up, always about Meta Ray-Ban. It's just the number one topic. It's the number one thing we have in our inbox that people talk about. Everyone's always asking questions about it. And of course, now since the new release of the new Ray-Ban Gen 2 and the upcoming version, which is from Oakley, the Vanguard, which is the wraparound ones, and of course the new display, which we now know will have a screen reader in it, although how
very
useful.
Exciting.
Yeah, I mean, it's a question though, isn't it? How useful is that going to be?
It's interesting because I think the first generation Meta glasses were almost accessible by accident. It was pure happenstance. And I think this, second gen Meta glasses and the Meta display glasses, they're the first time we've actually seen Meta as a company actually really caring about accessibility and thinking about accessibility specifically in the design of the product. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see how they do. They'll shout about, their accessibility credentials, as much as they like. I remember trying one of their Quest headsets here not that long ago, and that has no screen reader or anything. So it is good to see them moving in the right direction, but I am really interested to see if the Meta display glasses will even be of benefit to someone who is blind or visually impaired. I mean, what's the point of the display glasses if you're not going to see the display? Are you better just sticking with the regular ones. I'm kind of more interested in the neural band, if I'm honest, but it is going to be interesting to watch.
It's interesting because, like you say, the design and the idea is great. Yeah. Implementation is going to be another thing. I am personally more interested in this wearable devices access toolkit, or whatever they call it, which allows companies like, as we've been talking to, Microsoft and Humanware, which surprised me a little bit when I found out they were involved.
I heard that yesterday. Yeah,
it's interesting, isn't it, to find out what they're up to, and the fact they're thinking about AI navigation through this, and kind of building on the tools they've already put out. I just find that fascinating to see how they're even thinking in that way. I'm just so used to Humanware, I guess, just being a company that makes those kind of products that people buy, like the Victor Reader, the Stellar Trek, the Braille displays, and all of that.
Many great products, yeah.
Absolutely brilliant products, yeah. I just wouldn't have never have thought of them as a software company.
Sure.
Almost the opposite of how I feel about Envision.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting. Like, there are so many potential apps that I suppose we could see on something like the Meta glasses. Like, if you mentioned Envision there, we obviously know about seeing AI and Humanware. But I could imagine, something like, a Navi lens or something like that, also finding really good use cases for these glasses. So what that's going to look like in time is going to be really interesting. And it's going to, like, I've heard people describe this as another iPhone moment. And I think it really has the potential to be that. I don't think we're quite there yet. But, I mean, what's the iPhone without apps? And
well,
I think
the original iPhone.
Well,
that's
there
what
you
the
go,
iPhone
exactly.
is without. And
but
it didn't have
the iPhone
accessibility
3G,
either.
Well, there you have it. And that, I think we could claim that, accessibility made the iPhone what it is, but ultimately apps did in some respects.
Yes.
And I think that could be the start of this for the Meta glasses. And we've also heard, rumors. I was reading in Bloomberg recently as well that Apple are reportedly working on something like this for 2027. So still a bit out, but this is all going to move in the right direction. And I think there's some really interesting conversations yet to be had as to what, potential this has even outside of descriptions, but for navigation and all of that. It's very exciting, actually.
Now, one of the reasons you were coming on was to talk about LinkedIn, and I've got to say, LinkedIn, the world's biggest bragging network, as I like to call it, and I know everyone on LinkedIn loves when I say that, but it is. And, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But what I will say is that accessibility for me has, for a number of years, been lacking on the iOS app. I haven't, as some people have said to me, you should use the desktop version. Yeah, you know what, I do like a website, and I don't mind going through that, but for me, I'd probably rather use LinkedIn on my, especially when looking at feeds like that, I'd much rather go through it on my iPhone. And I've been left wanting. But there were a few issues that you were keen to come on and talk about. Now, they have since been resolved, which is good.
Yeah.
And that's kind of led you to what? Praise what they've done?
So, kind of praise. So, I think, so firstly, I am a big fan of LinkedIn. I'm happy to share, I think is the word they would use, that I am a big fan of LinkedIn. But I like LinkedIn. I think it's more a professional version of a Facebook or something like that. It's Facebook without your friends that you went to school with. But I opened LinkedIn the other day, and I'm a voiceover user primarily for context. I triple click it on and off because I do sometimes navigate using a magnifier. But I triple clicked voiceover on to read a comment or something that someone had posted, and all it simply said was the word like. And straight away, I was like, oh no, we have a problem. So tried all sorts of solutions and just nothing was happening. And straight away, I did two things. I made a post about it because that's what you do on LinkedIn. And I checked the Applevis forum of all places, because I've always found that, if there's an accessibility issue that's widespread, you'll usually find out about it on Applevis, which is brilliant. But there wasn't a whole lot of discussion of it at the time. But regardless, we plowed on and, made LinkedIn aware of it. But unfortunately, then a little bit later, that issue started to expand. So that issue expanded and also included posts. So now not only could I read comments, I could also just not read posts. It would just do that typical, that voiceover click when it has nothing to say. And this was very concerning because this made LinkedIn basically unusable. Now, what I will say is LinkedIn were really good and did take this genuinely seriously. And within, I think, 2 days, firstly, they fixed the comments issue. And then immediately after that, this issue started to spread. But they have now fixed both of those issues within like 2 days. And what this has left me thinking, Stephen, is, look, accessibility is something that moves forward and back all the time. Sometimes we do take steps backwards, and we do need to find a better way of incorporating access testing into apps like this, because it really does have quite significant impacts. Like, let's say this was Teams that had this issue hypothetically. That's my ability to do my job out the window. But with that said, what I did appreciate is that when it was flagged to LinkedIn, they did fix it really quickly. And I do think they deserve some praise, yes, for that, because it is something that it's important to people, and they did recognize that to their credit.
See, I'm glad you say that, because I think that oftentimes we're very quick to complain, and rightly so. We should complain when things are not right, but then we don't praise when they fix it. And I often find that interesting that we don't do the second part, which is actually, I think, the more important part in some ways, because you have to remember, and I've said this on the show many times, you have to remember the size of the teams we're talking about here. Oftentimes, very small numbers of people working in even large companies like Meta or Apple or Microsoft, they're not huge teams of people, especially when you compare them to machine learning teams or the AI training teams or whatever it might be.
Sure.
They're not going to be the same size of teams. So their resources are smaller, but their inbox is maybe just as big, if not larger in some cases, especially, those of us who send into the accessibility at apple.com regularly, or, the Microsoft support desk, whatever it might be. And I think it's important that when they get things right, and also when things are fixed, that we praise that. Again, I think that's not to say that they haven't made a mistake and they shouldn't learn from it, and we shouldn't say that, but we should also praise, I think.
Absolutely. And I think it is, that's partly anecdotal, that whole thing about how we are quick to criticize. And I think we need to be quick to criticize simply because we need to get word out for those who maybe have automatic updates on or whatever. Yeah. Like when I made that LinkedIn post, that wasn't me throwing stuff at LinkedIn. That's more just to make people aware that, yes, there is an issue. Just hold out for a little while until we know what's going on. But I think it's very telling in some respects that post that I shared with that issue, explaining the issue I was having, that post now has around 50 likes and over 10,000 impressions, right? The update that I made to that post explaining that there was a fix has less than 1,000. And I think that's understandable, but it's also a shame in one respect that, someone will look at that and they'll say, oh, LinkedIn accessibility, terrible. When actually, yes, it was terrible for 2 days, and that deserves to be criticized. But it also deserves praise when it was fixed or when improvements are made. We can't be totally negative, even though being negative is absolutely sometimes warranted.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it's about a bit of balance, also a little bit of patience. I mean, I remember being scolded by someone once on social media for daring to be, patient about something which at the time seemed so ridiculous. The idea that a company would announce a product and not have even mentioned accessibility. Now, of course, we want to be mentioned. We want to be referred to as being part of the thinking that goes into technology. But, at the end of the day, this was an announcement for a product at that particular point. I think it was a Windows 11, I think it was being announced. And, they were literally just showing you, the wrapper at that point. They weren't giving you any detail about anything. And, this person was demanding that, we should be, jumping up and down about the fact that accessibility wasn't mentioned. While at the same time, endless events were going by where disability was never mentioned. And it's also, I have to say this as well. I've often found, I don't know if you found this, but I have noticed when we talked about Meta and the announcements about the screen reader being on there, about the wearable device access toolkit, I was amazed at the lack of take-up and promotion of that story. Not necessarily of our coverage of it, although that was always be welcome and nice, but actually the story itself wasn't being widely publicized. And sometimes I think that the answer to that is down to the fact that it's Meta. You know, I've often said on the show that when X, fired their entire accessibility team, we were all concerned the wheels would fall off and that the app would become unresponsive, or, we wouldn't be able to use it. The website would fall to bits, and actually none of that has happened. And when there were issues recently, I say recently, maybe about a year ago, it was fixed within a few days. And so, again, it's not about saying that, I can't have disagreements about using an app or whatever, but I think we've got to be careful we don't become too political in this, and we start to become a little bit moral in what we actually promote and what we talk about. Meta, they're stealing all our data, their privacy is, concerning or whatever. I think AI generally is concerning when it comes to, how it works.
But I think it's very easy for us to live in a bubble in some respects, where we're hearing, like there are certain companies, I think, in what I'm going to call the blindness space that are almost universally praised. And then there are other companies that don't seem to be able to catch a break.
Yeah.
And I think we need to have a very balanced discussion about, what are the benefits of AI? What are the drawbacks of AI? And I'm using AI as an example there, but, that could be on anything. What are the benefits of something like, Meta glasses? But also, what are their drawbacks? What is good about the product? But I think the Meta glasses are a fantastic product. Mm-hmm. But I'll be the first to admit that sometimes the accuracy is terrible and the battery life is shocking.
Yeah.
So it's, it is important to be upfront about these things. And I think by doing that, all we can do is provide information to people who are blind or visually impaired and share that among ourselves. And, sometimes that information will, intersect with the mainstream, but the reality is that, you mentioned the app toolkit. For whatever reason, that's not a sexy story, even though it may be a legitimately game-changing story for us. So,
I'm not talking about mainstream coverage. I'm talking about in the community, in the bubble. That's what I'm talking about. I mean, I don't expect the mainstream media to get too excited about this unless perhaps it creates some amazing, was it golf? I think was the story I saw, because you actually looked through the list of companies that were actually trialing out or at least putting the developers onto this wearable device kit. One was about golf, and that made one of the headlines, I think, on The Verge or whatever. I get that. Look, I don't expect the mainstream to get particularly excited about it. I wish they did, but
I think some
it
people
doesn't surprise me.
I think some people do. And look, I would absolutely love if, accessibility was mentioned front and center all the time. It would certainly make my job easier. But it's not, unfortunately. And I think all we can do is advocate for that to become the case more. I think Apple have started to, include that in marketing, Google increasingly too. And, sometimes, it's a catch-22, because sometimes as well, then they're going to be accused, you're just using that for, for marketing or the pity party or whatever. There are so many criticisms you can throw. But I think generally, I think it's good to remain positive where we can, because I think generally, and yes, there are things that are moving in the wrong direction. But in general, I think we're living in a golden age in some respects for people who are blind or visually impaired, because even though they do have their flaws, Meta glasses have made a massive impact. Other things as well, AI, even in the last 3 years, it's crazy to think 5 years ago, Be My AI didn't exist.
Yeah.
That's crazy to think about now. But at the same time, I think we are truly in a golden age, and it keeps on consistently getting better, even though there are step backs sometimes.
So are you saying that, overall things are improving, but should we just begin to accept that we will have fallbacks, that a product will get released and there might be an issue, and we just have to accept that?
We should always complain. When something is not up to scratch, we should absolutely shout about that from the rooftops, because that's how we get heard. That's, we have to do that. If we want to be listened to, we at least have to make our voices heard. But with that said, I do think we are moving in the right direction. That's not saying we should just, shut up and take what we're given. Absolutely not.
No, I agree with that.
We are moving in the right direction, I think. And there are some brilliant people doing, exceptional work at times. And they do deserve credit for that too.
Yeah, no, I agree with all of that. I think it's sometimes the approach is everything. I think it's all about the approach. I think, I see it with guide dog refusals as a great example of this, where people go in almost fired up, ready to have a war with someone who dares to say you can't come in here with a dog. You can argue that's right, because that person should be allowed in, and that is absolutely true. Again, though, there's two approaches I think you could also take. One is to have a conversation and be gentle about it, and consider, not just the fact that you're going in there, you want to go in for a meal, but also that this person may genuinely not know what guide dog or what legislation exists. There's so much assumption, I think, and this is kind of born out of social media, if I'm honest. This idea that we all just end up living inside these bubbles, and I see it in the blindness community a lot, where people live inside bubbles. In one example of that, and I'm not going to draw you into this, but I'll just say it for me. But inclusive language and the debate around that, and the way that we should use words a certain way, and we shouldn't use this phrase versus that phrase. And I think it's great that you think that inside the bubble, but then you go out to the real world and it doesn't make any sense to anyone. It actually creates more problems than it resolves. And so you can get really fired up in your base, and then all of a sudden you go out there and you tell someone, you get ready, and then suddenly you end up with a negative, situation. And so I think the approach is everything, and how you approach it. Take a breath, ask yourself in 20 minutes if this would matter to you if a family member told you they were in trouble. That's often how I measure most things in my life. Is it that important really? And yes, of course, it is important things get fixed, but our reaction, the temperature of that reaction needs to be measured a little bit, I think. So
you win a lot with diplomacy, I think. And it takes patience, and sometimes the loudest person in the room gets the most done. But I would also argue that in a lot of cases, it's the work that happens in the background that makes the biggest difference. And I think it might just be, like you said earlier, an email to accessibility@apple.com, or it might be just a quick note to someone that's working at a company. Hey, can you make this a little bit easier in some way, shape, or form?
Don't moan on social media. I mean, okay, that's not a bad thing to do if you're atting the company or whatever. That's not a bad thing. So it will get you there. But again, don't sit in your friend group and say this is terrible and that this is awful and isn't it awful and why is nothing being done? What are you doing? What can you do? And like we say, it could be a simple email. Again, be courteous and kind, because at the end of the day, and I'm not into the whole, well, maybe not get into this, but I get a little bit irritated by the be kind movement, because sometimes I feel that they're also telling you just to shut the hell up, and I've spent my entire life being told to shut the hell up. So, I kind of go against that sometimes, but I think it's important to be courteous to people, considerate of people. And remember that you are contacting human beings. We're not all talking to robots yet.
Not yet. That's next year. Yeah. But I think, look, there is a lot to be said for just, I suppose, doing your best to support and provide information. Don't just get mad straight out the gate, even though that is, look, I'm guilty of it. I'm absolutely guilty of it. And I'm also, I'd acknowledge there that not everyone needs to be or wants to be an advocate.
100%.
And that, I think, is part of this as well. There are some people who, just don't need that in their lives, because someone said to me once that, advocating and arguing and all of that, it takes energy, and it does. I have a handful of things. I care deeply about media accessibility. I care deeply about a few other things, but I'm also not going to be the one emailing every politician when a traffic light in my local area stops working.
Yeah.
And I think, there are only so many battles that any one person is going to take on at any given time. And I think that's absolutely okay. I'll advocate when I want to advocate. But I will always be, as much as I can be, you try to be kind when you're doing that, I think.
Yeah, I think that's important. I go one step further than that, though, David. I'm not an advocate. And people get annoyed when I say that. They say, well, you're on a public platform. You've got a place where you can talk and you can discuss issues and all that. And I say, well, no, I don't mind having advocates on the show, and they can promote what they need to promote or say what they need to say. And I think my role is to challenge that a little bit sometimes and be able to say, well, actually, okay, is this the right approach? Is it not? And to stand away from that. But I'm an individual. This is me personally, not anyone else. And I'm not speaking, I don't speak for a community. I speak for myself. And I think it's really important people understand that when they deal with me and they talk to me, because I don't want to be that guy. I remember I told this story on air about going for guide dog training. And I remember someone saying, when you're a guide dog owner, this was a long time ago. I don't know if they say this now. I don't even think how long ago it was, but it was a while ago. Probably in the era of black and white television, something like that. And
sure.
Yeah, thanks. And
before AI.
Yeah, before you, I think, probably before you even existed.
But there you go.
And at that time, the person said to me, Stephen, when you're a guide dog owner, you are an ambassador for the blind community. And I'm like, whoa, hang on a minute.
It's a big word.
No, I'm not. Yeah. Because what you're doing is you're putting every interaction, every bad move I make, every worst possible thing I say, almost as the face of the community. So in other words, if I dare to say to someone while I'm crossing a road, no, I don't need help, thank you, then I'm somehow just doing a disservice to the community. I don't like that. I just don't like that.
I understand why you don't like that. I think, though, in some respects, whether we like it or not, and you may not associate with the label, I think we all can sometimes accidentally become advocates purely by the fact that there isn't that many blind or visually impaired people. Like for, some people in, my local area or your local area or whatever service you interact with, the local pub, whatever, you might be the only person who is blind or visually impaired that they meet in that year. To them, all blind, visually impaired people are, Stephen Scott or David Redmond. They are, their whole reflection of blind people is you sometimes.
But I push back on that, right? And I'll tell you why.
Sure.
Or how, I should say, more to the point. I once said, whatever situation you're in where you talk to a blind person in this way, and you say, I met a blind person the other day, he was really rude to me. And I've met taxi drivers who've said this. I met a blind guy the other week and he was really rude and really nasty. And I didn't really think that, I thought, those blind people aren't very nice. And I said, okay, do me a favor, quick game here, right? I want you to take the word blind out and put the word woman in. Now read that sentence back. Come on. I met a woman the other day.
Difference.
And to me, there's no difference, right? It's because we think there's a difference because there's less of us out there. I don't think there is a difference, actually. I think when you think about that sentence, you realize how ridiculous the first one was.
I understand where you're coming from. I don't necessarily agree, though, because I think that there are, the reality is there are less blind and visually impaired people out there. And we can not want to be advocates all we want. And we don't have to actively participate in advocacy. That's absolutely fine. But I do think we can kind of, whether we like it or not, we do, hold that flag, and we are blind or visually impaired. And, if one of us does something good or bad or whatever, it does speak a lot for the community, whether it should or it shouldn't. I'm not taking a position on that, but I think it can do in a lot of cases, whether we want it to or not.
A good example of this was recently I was on a radio show where I was asked the question, how do I talk to what's the right phrase I think they were looking to get? If I meet you in the street, should I call you blind? Should I call you visually impaired? Should I call you X, Y, Z? What should I call you? And I said, here's the first word you need to know in that situation. Ask. That's all you need. Ask. And I think what we have to do is break down this idea of us being one big homogenous group of people. That's how you start getting away from this idea that we are just one big homogenous group of people and, blind people who all just think and feel the same way. I've grown up in this world. I've seen it from the inside as well as the outside, right? I was, had fairly decent-ish vision, probably not great, but in my mind it was okay back when I was young and in my 20s. And then, as my late 20s came in my 30s and then into my 40s, that's gotten worse to bad levels, let's just say, for me. And again, speaking for myself, right? And I find it galls me because I can see on the inside in this group, in this world of blind people, that there is a lot of groupthink. There is a lot of, we all just think the same way on these issues, or we should all think the same way on these issues. I've had people say to me, when I talk about Braille, you shouldn't speak about Braille. You shouldn't talk about this. Don't even bring it up. Don't even discuss it. Because if you dare to say anything negative about Braille, then you're doing the community a disservice. So the community is doing this to itself in some ways. They're creating this groupthink. And I challenge that all the time. I do it on this program as much as I can. I say, no, we must be able to think for ourselves. I've had people, David, on this program who've said, very big early days of this show, once people got the hang of who I was and got the idea of what I'm like as a person, they stopped doing it. But people used to come on and say, I don't want you to say, that this phone is, there's 15 different options out there for you if you're buying an Android phone. I don't want you to tell me that. I want you to tell me the one to buy. Tell me the phone I need to buy. That's what everyone else would do. They would just tell me what to buy. Well, I don't believe in that. I believe you should empower yourself to listen, learn, educate yourself, find out, talk to other people, hear what we're saying, but hear what others are saying. Make up your own mind.
There is no one size fits all. I'll absolutely agree with you on that. And I think, anyone who tells you that there is, they're wrong in many respects. So you can agree with them, absolutely. But it depends on you. And it depends on what you're looking for. I mean, like we said, the meta glasses, it's not for everyone, even though you would ask a lot of people who are blind or visually impaired and they will swear by them, and justifiably so. It may be perfect for them. But there is no one size fits all, and these things aren't for everyone. But yeah, it's an interesting world, and I think sometimes we can live in a bubble. But it is something that I generally think that things are moving in a good direction, though.
Yeah, I mean, getting back to the original question, which you were beginning to answer about a week ago when we started this conversation.
I know, sorry.
I dragged you on this whole other world. But welcome to Double Tap, eh? That's how it works over
here. This is the whole show, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much. That's it. This is just Double Tap in a nutshell. Eventually we'll take a detour and end up back at, where we began. So let's talk about something else, because I know you recently got an Apple Ultra Watch 3.
Yes, I did.
I'm intrigued to know your thinking. I have to say, I got this Series 11 in titanium.
Oh, very good.
Doing well over
splashed.
Here. I splashed out the cat. Well, I say that. What actually happened was I was originally going to go for just whatever aluminium or whatever the original one is, the cheaper one. Yeah. And I was told by the guy in the store, I'd taken in a load of stuff to trade in, and they didn't have the AirPods Pro 3 in stock at that point. So I thought, well, if I don't have that, I may as well just use the money from the trade-in and just get a better watch. Don't really know why I did that, but I did.
Yeah.
I'll tell you my thoughts on the Series 11 in a minute, but I'm intrigued to know why you went for the Ultra Watch 3.
So, yeah, it's a great question. I'm quite conscious. Anytime I'm on this podcast, I seem to be talking about a, expensive piece of tech that I bought that might be slightly overpriced. Last time it was the iPad Pro, which I still swear by the way.
That's right.
But the Apple Watch Ultra 3, this was an upgrade to me from the Series 5, which had quite poor battery life at this point. I had almost decided before I was going in that I was going for a new Apple Watch Ultra purely because I wanted the top of the range. like straight up, that's why I wanted it.
Yep.
And also the idea of the action button really appealed to me, and the battery life really appealed to me. It's hard, like for me, I was looking at the Apple Store after, and I was looking at that Series 11, and I did think, do you know what? Do I really need the Ultra? And in the end, I stuck with my original decision and I went with the Ultra. And I don't regret getting the Ultra. Would I recommend many other people get the Ultra? I don't know. I don't think so. I think for the vast majority of people, the Series 11 is going to be sufficient. And it's probably like, would it have been sufficient for me? Absolutely. But I do like the Ultra. I suppose for those who haven't ever felt the Ultra, I'm wearing it on my wrist now. It feels different to the Series 11. It's a much heavier. The screen is kind of raised, and there is an action button on the opposite side to where the crown, the digital dial, and the other kind of button that you'd use for things like Apple Pay. Opposite to that, there is the actual action button. Doesn't stand out as much if you're feeling it, which I thought was interesting. But it doesn't feel as elegant as a watch, but it is still a really nice watch to use, and its battery life is absolutely superb. I have had it on me since 7 a.m. today. It's probably coming up to 7 p.m. now, and it is still, chugging along at 90%. That's incredible.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
That's really, really cool.
I mean, the other thing, and so for me, I like the Ultra Watch design. I like the style of it. It is quite a heavy watch. You're right. I mean, it's a much heavier watch to wear than the Series 11, which was a consideration for me. I opted for the Series 11 because I like you, I kind of went the other way, right? I thought, I don't need all this stuff in the Ultra. I'm just going to go for the Series 11. It's got more than enough in it. The SE didn't have the hypertension notifications. And in fairness, none of them do at the moment because it's still coming through. I think it may have arrived in the US, but it's not in the UK at the moment.
Yeah, so I think we do have it actually here in Ireland, which is cool.
So that's good. But the SE didn't have that. And I thought, well, that's, I've had hypertension in the past that's bothered me. I'd like to know if it's coming up again. So that was a deal breaker on the SE. Otherwise, I would have gone for the SE, actually.
Yeah.
Because again, it's that thing of what do I actually need?
Yeah.
Sorry, you go.
Do you know what? It is like sometimes I will splash just to get the latest, fanciest one.
Of course.
If I was buying it again, I'd probably go with the Series 11. But I also do really like the watch that I have, and I'm not going to return it. There are things that I think were poor decisions. I didn't like the strap on the Apple Watch Ultra. It's a different strap. It's not the kind of, rubber kind of one that you get on the regular watches. I didn't like it. It was more of an elastic kind of strap.
Oh, right. Okay.
Or not elastic. Sorry. What do you call that stuff that you tie your shoes with? Velcro. There we go. The Velcro kind of strap.
Yeah,
I didn't like that personally.
No, that's horrible. That was a horrible.
And look, I'm not going to be using my Apple Watch Ultra as a dive computer. I'm just not.
Are you not, David? Really?
You know what? The one other, the really niche thing that has actually bothered me a little bit, and I wrote a review about this for our newsletter in Vision Ireland, but one thing that has bugged me a little bit more as I've continued using it actually is I used to do this thing almost instinctively with the old watch, whereas if I didn't want to hear someone, if I didn't want someone to hear my voiceover, I would put my finger over the opposite side to kind of block the speaker a little bit so I could hear it, but others couldn't. You can't do that as easily on the Ultra because that's where the action button is. So you can't get at the speaker with your finger a little bit. And it's a tiny little detail, but it is something that I've noticed. So there are pros and cons. I do still really like the watch. I'm really happy with it. I love Workout Buddy. I don't know if you tried that yet, Stephen?
No, if you know me, you know I'm not Mr. Workout. And I certainly don't want the buddy to tell me what I'm thinking. I know what I'm thinking of the buddy right now. Never mind what the buddy thinks of me.
it's really an interesting almost accessibility feature, even though it wasn't designed as this. But if you do, like, I will do an indoor walk because it's the safest one for me to do. But you'll be running along or walking along, listening to music or whatever you're doing. And then straight away, you like after you've hit your first kilometer or whatever, you get this really enthusiastic voice that says, "That's your first kilometer in the books. You did it in 120 beats per minute with, whatever time you did it in." It's like really cool accessibility feature, actually. But is it necessary? No. Is it nice to have? Yeah. And that's how I would summarize the Ultra 3, I guess.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to tell you something. If you were to decide that you should have gone instead for the Series 11, I would say, and I'll use my sound effects board for this one, bad choice. I'm regretting it, if I'm honest. I'm kind of regretting it. I'll tell you why. I really like the action button.
Okay.
That would have been a bonus ball for me for that. So, okay, that's one thing. But one thing I'm not liking on this watch is the speaker. It's not great. And
that's really interesting.
I mean, it's okay. Don't get me wrong. It's a decent enough speaker, but it's not ultra speaker. And the speaker on that, I know, is much better.
But you were hardly expecting Dolby Atmos here. I mean, look.
No, but I am literally having it up to my ear more. And I think that's not good. I shouldn't need to do that.
Yeah,
so,
that's fair.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how loud you find the speaker. I mean, of course, there's
I don't have mine at full volume because I don't want to check the time in the middle of the night and wake everyone else in the house.
Yeah.
Do you know?
But what about outdoors? Because indoors is one thing, but what about outdoors? How does it feel? Can you keep the watch at if you're on a train, for example? Could you hear it without having to have it up to your ear?
I do find I still kind of bring it quite close. Just me personally. I've never had it at full volume, but the speaker is decent. And as I say, sometimes too loud to the point where I want to cover the side. I was in a bathroom, a public bathroom, and it was me and one other person. And I checked the time, and I kind of, without seeing them, I almost thought, goodness, now everyone in the neighborhood knows the time. Is kind of, I didn't want to and look, it wasn't a notification or anything, but it's still, sometimes you want it to be a bit quieter. So I don't think there's ever a perfect option, really, but it was an interesting one.
I want to talk about, look, we could talk more about the Apple Watch Ultra 3 day and night. I think for you, it's a great phone, a great watch. I personally may go in and swap it out and get that instead. I think the price is kind of comparable, so I'm probably not going to lose any money by changing over to the Ultra 3.
Especially when you consider that you're also getting the cellular connectivity at that price as well. The cellular is built in as standard on the Ultra 3, whereas it's not on the regular Apple Watch Ultra series, the regular Apple Watch series range. You have to pay more. So it works out at about, I guess for us, it will be about kind of 250 to 300 euros more that you're paying for the Ultra versus getting all of those features on the series range.
Okay, I'll let you know what happens. Let's talk about Sky. Now, Sky, for those who are listening around the world, is a broadcaster. I've talked about them many times on the show.
Yes, you have. I've heard.
I've been shouting and ranting, as I do, and in particular about the issue of audio description on demand on the Sky platform. So, whilst, and Sky being a broadcaster who delivers linear television into the home, like many networks around the US and Canada and Ireland and other parts of the world, Sky is a satellite broadcaster. It has linear channels and on demand. And for many years, we've had very good audio description from Sky and other broadcasters on linear television. But on demand, well, that has been lacking in particular on Sky. Until now. And on your podcast, you've been talking to someone from Sky Give us the update. What's going on?
Yeah, so we had on our podcast, which I'll shamelessly plug now, Talking Technology with VI Labs. You can search for that wherever you want it. But yesterday on our podcast, we were catching up with Dave Nason, who I think may have been on this podcast before. But we were talking about new accessibility improvements that they're making to their Sky platform. So this goes back to what I was saying earlier about accessibility slowly but surely moving in the right direction. So now, if you have audio description turned on your Sky box, so your Sky Glass, Sky Stream, Sky Plus, or Sky Q box, it will automatically play audio description if that audio description is available on demand. So this is something that they've been working on for a very long time. It's taken a really long time, but it is now available and rolling out on certain shows. So you can watch movies and TV shows on demand with audio description, which is really cool.
And, it goes right back to the beginning of our conversation here where, I can be, and I was the angry, shouty person about this. I feel like I said earlier, I think at times it's justified, and
justifiably
I do believe it's justified. I'm paying quite a lot of money to have Sky Television at home. In particular, I had Sky Glass, which is this new way of delivering television. So no longer am I using a satellite. I'm actually using the internet to get my TV. The internet is broadcast, or the TV channels are broadcast on the internet into this box. And, all these shows are there with AD on the linear channels. But when I go to watch a movie or a TV show on Sky On Demand, there was nothing. And I've got to say, well done for doing it. I criticized them, and I think I was right to. And, I remember speaking to, I believe, I won't say his name because I'll probably get it wrong. I know his first name was Fraser, and he was at Sky at the time. I think he's moved further into Comcast now, the company behind Sky now, who owns Sky. Yeah. And I remember I'm on the show, Fraser Sterling, I think his name was. That was his name. And great guy. He came on, a fellow Scot, so I knew I could be upfront with him. And I said to him, you know what? You're 18 years late to the party, but at least you turned up. And that was in particular around voice guidance, not audio description, but around a screen reader being built into Sky Q, which was another of their products. Yeah. And again, some people said, well, you should have been on their case more. And I'm like, well, look, they've done the work now. They've done it. They've brought it in. It's good. I mean, yes, it should have happened sooner. Other networks have been way ahead on this. And it is absolutely ridiculous that we are still fighting for this and fighting for this access in 2025. But you know what? I'm glad it is finally here, because there are so many shows. And, it's true what they say. No matter what situation you go through in life, this will pass. This feeling will pass of anger and it not being there. When I'm sitting watching The Sopranos or Succession or any of the shows that are available from Sky, or through Sky, I should say, in the UK, I'm going to be happy. I'm going to be watching My Sopranos again, saying I can finally, and I actually think I'll get a whole new lease of life because I don't think I've ever seen it with AD. So that's fantastic. It's going to be great. And I'm looking at the positives here.
Absolutely. And it is good to look at those positives. There are other updates as well. They're adding a speed adjustment to their voice guidance screen reader. That's really always brilliant to see. You can go a million miles an hour if you want. You can now use the voice guidance screen reader within apps as well. And they also announced that they're going to be rolling out a new control app for Sky Glass and Stream customers. So that's the one you have, Stephen, and I have the Sky Stream. So that's like a little streaming puck, kind of like a Fire TV or an Apple TV, really. But they are rolling out a Sky Remote app for that in the next little while as well. So they've got some really cool stuff coming, and absolutely better late than never. But if people do want to learn more about that, I'm sure you may or may not have them on at some point in the future. But we also have that discussion over on our podcast, Talking Technology. So yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful. Yeah, absolutely. Go check out that podcast. It is so vital that the work you're doing at Vision Ireland. I love what you do. I'm so glad you come on. We need to get you on more, actually, because I I feel you've got many updates you can share that are very
You'll be
interesting.
sick of me before long.
No, I love it. I love it because it allows me to say RRR all the time. And of
There
course,
you have it.
You love it.
Even if people will have to let you know whether they like it or not. There you go.
Do you honestly think it'll change anything if they tell me I don't?
Absolutely not. And that's what I love about this show.
Yeah, you know it's going to just make me do it more. That's the thing.
Yeah, it's true.
Listen, it's great having you on, David. I love having you on here. Thank you so much for coming on, spending some time with us. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you so much, Stephen. An absolute pleasure as always.
Double Tap thanks Turtleback Cases for supporting this podcast and for their decades-long commitment to the blind and low vision community. Since 2003, Turtleback has been the original name behind protective leather cases for note takers, trusted by thousands and designed with real feedback from real users. Made in the USA, their cases are rugged, ergonomic, and built to last. They offer custom-fitted protection for devices like the Victor Reader Stream 3, Blind Shell Classic 3, Mantis Q40, Sense Player, Orbit Reader 20, Focus 40, Braille eMotion, and more. Use promo code DT12 for 12% off your entire order. And yes, they ship worldwide via FedEx, complete with tracking. Visit turtlebacklv.com to see the full lineup. Huge thanks to David Redmond for joining me on the show today. And of course, don't forget to check out the Talking Technology podcast. Wherever you get your podcasts, we will, of course, have all of the information in our show notes, but you can just search for Vision Ireland Talking Technology and you will find the podcast there. Great story and great catch on that news about Sky getting audio description. I am so pleased about that. It feels like it's been a long time in coming. They're a little bit behind in many, many ways, Sky, and it's not, I have to be honest, it's not quite like the Apple thing where once they do turn up, they get it right 100%. But the fact is, we must praise where praise is due. And the fact is that it has finally turned up. So we can be pleased about that, if nothing else. That is it from me today. It's been great being with you. But, it's always nice to have our good friend Shaun here. He will return hopefully tomorrow. Hopefully he'll be well enough to go back tomorrow. If so, we'll join him then. But that is it for me today. Thank you as always. Keep in touch. Feedback at doubletaponair.com. Don't forget you can subscribe to our newsletter as well. New one's about to drop when you can catch up with all of the month's news, all of the stuff we've done over the month. You can find it all in one easy-to-use, accessible newsletter in your email inbox. Just go to doubletaponair.com for more details. Catch you next time.